Can we talk about narcissism? Muslim narcissists. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Hannah. I am a trauma coach who works with Muslim women. I help Muslim women heal from trauma and build a beautiful life ahead of them. So if that is something you are ready to do, go to the links in my description to learn more about my trauma group coaching program, which is at this point, I think, the most popular trauma group coaching program for Muslim women. It is extremely robust. There's tons of testimonials on my website, on my YouTube channel, because the system works. So check that out. Inshallah, the next group cohort is going to be launching very soon, and they fill out very quickly, at least a month in advance usually. I forgot who asked me to make this video, but this is a topic that I feel like is so neglected. So let me start off by saying, I know there's a book, I had heard from a few clients, a book called The Muslim Narcissist. I've not read the book. I'm not super well acquainted with the content of the book. I think it's a super, super cool idea. So to Dr. Muna, I believe her name is, if you're watching this video, assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for taking your time and putting your research and effort into creating resources and a book around this, because I'm sure so many people are benefiting from it. So I just want to say that, because if I say something that sounds similar to what oh my God, I hope her name is Dr. Muna. Dr. Muna says, I'm not stealing her content. I genuinely have not read the book. I'm just kind of giving my own personal takes and thoughts on this as a trauma coach. At one point, I had put out a video about how to spot a female narcissist. For those of you guys who don't know, female and male narcissists have different gendered patterns. Female narcissists tend to use more social, kind of social currency and social strategies to cause harm, right? Isolating people, gossip, insulting, the way someone looks. And male narcissists approach things a bit differently, though they can also use those tactics. And I think in that video I mentioned that narcissism is a spiritual disease, right? Someone had asked me to make a video about it, and I was just like, I know it was on my mind today, so we're gonna make a video about it today. I also put out videos recently on the different types of narcissists. Currently, we have kind of like 6. This is, I believe, inspired by Dr. Ramani's work, who does a lot of work on narcissism. She is not Muslim, so obviously her content is not Islamically informed, hence why I created the videos that I did. And talking also about how to heal from that type of narcissism, because different narcissisms, different types and different flavors affect people emotionally, psychologically, mentally, and spiritually very differently. And so the approaches to healing them, there are nuances there. So you can watch those videos. It should be titled like 3 types of narcissists, 3 more types of narcissists. It's a 2-part series. But let's talk about this from an Islamic perspective. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I say that narcissism at its core is an issue of a lack of empathy. Narcissists as a quality, because narcissism is a quality. It's a trait like being rude is a trait, like being kind is a trait. Narcissism is a trait, meaning anyone can have this trait, and you can have it to varying degrees, right? But at its core, it's a lack of empathy. Narcissists are it is all about the self. It is an extremely egotistical characteristic to have. Your suffering is the greatest suffering. Your success is the most important success. Others do not matter to you in the way that it should matter to a Muslim. There's a degree of empathy that is lost on narcissists. And one thing that's very scary about it is at the furthest end of the spectrum, when it comes to narcissists, when empathy is completely lost, that's where we get sociopathy. Right? Sociopaths, one of the core elements is that they do not have empathy. Now, when I say empathy, I don't mean empathy in just an emotional experience, right? Empathy, we think like, oh, you understand, I always hated the term, like, what you can walk, understand what it's like to walk in someone's shoes. Empathy is a genuine, deep concern, in the way I would define it, of another person's experience. And even if you haven't fully felt what they felt or know what it's like, you can at least come to a place of understanding that their suffering matters and how it affects them, and wanting to know more about that. That's how I would define empathy. Narcissists lack a narcissist's lack of empathy is a spiritual disease because it is so necessary as a Muslim to have empathy of other people. The Prophet ﷺ told us, right, that the ummah is like one body. When one part of the body is harmed, and forgive me for not getting the wording exactly, I'm sure many of you have heard the hadith, that the other, the rest of the body is affected. The rest of the body feels fever. And this is an ultimate example of empathy, right? In our dealings with other people, the constant emphasis that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts on the rights of other people, right? That is another branch of empathy. To recognize that other people have rights is to recognize that they innately have value as a human being. And because of that value that was given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm going to be mindful of the way my actions affect them, right? And so that is an exercise in empathy. There are people that can still do that and not be empathetic. But the point is, it is such an important concept in our deen. To know how your words harm other people, to know how your actions harm other people. What is so terrifying about narcissism is because not only is it a spiritual disease, but it's also weaved into many cultures, many Islamically influenced cultures, right? Cultures where majority people from that culture are Muslim. It gets weaved in there to a point that people start to conflate this self-centeredness with deen, right? The most typical example that I can give, because it's the easiest one to see, it's the most common time that I see, or the most common kind that I see, is parents who have narcissistic qualities and they demand their rights from their children without recognizing the parents' lack of empathy for the rights of the children, right? It's insane. And then the damage that is caused by that, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, it is difficult to even enumerate or to objectively measure the extent of damage that is caused by that. And I say this as someone who works every single day with women who have experienced childhood trauma, and seeing brothers who, hearing the stories of brothers on my channel who have experienced childhood trauma and the repercussions of that. The aftermath inevitably is a loss of taqwa. You cannot be from the muttaqeen, the God conscious, and not have sincere concern of how your actions impact the experiences of other people. You cannot be from the muttaqeen and have taqwa and not care about how your words affect the rights of another. You can't do it. Those two things don't match. You can't be someone who says that they embody the Quran, and how many verses speak about interaction between person to person and the rights of people over people, not to oppress and not to harm, and then you go out and do that, right? And you cannot be from the muttaqeen and do that while using Islam to justify your narcissism. The scary thing about many narcissists is it's like they have blinders on. They don't see their damage. If you explain it to them, they can get it logically, but they very intentionally distort what is happening and manipulate it in order to justify it, right? And that is Shaitan's classic trick. If he can make it so that your suffering is the greatest suffering in your mind, then you disconnect from the suffering of other people and you don't care about how you add to it, right? And the thing about narcissism as well is that the ego side of narcissism, depending on the kind it is, can almost turn into a pseudo-shirk. What do I mean by that, right? It starts to be that, and this is especially true in malignant narcissism. If you don't know what I mean by that, you can go to my the link, my recent video on the 3 types of narcissism. It'll be in the second video. Malignant narcissists especially build such an intense ego and are so just sadistic and self-centered and like willing to do harm to an extent that it literally becomes criminal, that they start to see themselves as almost superhuman, almost something worthy of being worshipped, right? That no one has the right to challenge them. And that's terrifying, because the only one we have no right to challenge is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by extension, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us not to challenge, right? Which truly are just the prophets. That's it. They're the one who, and they come with the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it makes sense in that dynamic. But everyone else is up for question when it comes to oppression. No leader, whether you are a parent, whether you are a leader of a community as an imam, or a scholar, or the leader of a nation or a culture or a tribe, whatever it is, no leader is absent of the ability to be criticized. You can't do it, because the moment that gets taken away, oppression now can run rampant. And a person who says, you can't criticize me, you can't tell me that I am doing something wrong, I never do anything wrong, everything that I do is right, even when it's counter to the deen, even when it's counter to the Quran, that is a person who is trying to bring themselves up to the level of a right that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. How terrifying. How terrifying. There's a bit of a side of me that when I just see this and I realize the extent of just horrible pain that people go through when they live with someone or close to someone who embodies narcissism, especially to the higher degrees. And you can't say you can't ever tell them that they're wrong. They're never wrong. They're what they do and what they say, they just never take accountability for, right? If you decide to walk away from them because of that, or you decide to, set healthy boundaries within the confines of what Islam allows, you're wrong. You're rocking the boat. And it's so sad to see. It's so sad to see how blind we are to the impact of that. We're becoming less and less blind as we see it happen. And I feel like at this point I have narcissism vision, because I've done so much work around this, and I've subhanAllah, that I'll see people who embody the characteristic on social media, and people praise them. This is especially true with the grandiose narcissists. And we feed into it. And even within the Muslim community, there are people who are on social media who are class act narcissists. Oh my God, so easy to spot, but you have to have a trained eye. So I have no clue if this video was of any enlightenment or support to any, but I just wanted to share some reflections on that and just help us to really reframe narcissism as a quality on a spectrum, understanding that it is ultimately a spiritual disease. At the lowest amount, we can rectify it, we can make tawbah, we can grow from it, and by building that empathy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to have of other people. And even beyond that, I mean, our deen even teaches us to be empathetic to animals. Or when you think about, there's a story of a camel, I believe it was, that complained to the Prophet ﷺ that it was being overworked. It was either a camel, horse, or a donkey. So forgive me if anyone knows the exact reference to the hadith. And the Prophet ﷺ went to the owner and gave him a piece of his mind, because you're doing harm to this, you're oppressing this animal. If we're supposed to be empathetic of animals, what say you to being empathetic of another Muslim? SubhanAllah. So understanding that it's a spiritual disease, at the lowest end we can make tawbah, and at the furthest end you are now becoming an accomplice to shaitan, and you are elevating yourself to a level that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates. And you will be held accountable for that. For the people who are watching this who are like, oh my God, do I have narcissistic tendencies? Chances are, if you're willing to ask yourself that question and have that concern, even if you did, it would probably be on the lower end. That doesn't excuse us from doing the work on ourselves to heal from that, to grow from that, to build our character through it, through our Quran, through the seerah of the Prophet, the sunnah of the Prophet, and I pray that everybody is able to just embody the type of person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be. If you like this kind of video, then please hit like, subscribe. And if you are interested in trauma coaching, like I mentioned, the link is in the description. Assalamu alaikum.